Hello again, and welcome back to Farrand on Film. This is our 10th official episode, not including the short update that kicked everything off or the roadcast competition entry, so I'd just like to thank everyone who has listened so far. Your support is very much appreciated. Following last week's episode on the teen film genre, this episode will take you through all the required learning for the GCSE set text, Rebel Without a Cause. Rebel Without a Cause was released in 1955. The film revolves around a group of emotionally charged suburban middle-class teenagers and was a commentary on society at the time, and also an alternative to similar narratives set in poorer locations. James Dean, the film's star, tragically died in a car accident a month before the film was released. So why are we studying Rebel Without a Cause? As you know, Paper 1 of the Film Studies GCSE is focused on the key developments of American film. Question 1 on Paper 1 is focused on the first of two films that form a base for our comparative study, that spreads across questions 1, 2 and 3 of Paper 1. In order for us to effectively compare and contrast the early developments of American film with its later counterparts, we start here, at question 1, with a film released in the 1950s. The typical layout of question 1 is three smaller stepped questions about some element of film form: cinematography, sound, editing, mise-en-scène, narrative, representation or generic conventions, and how they are used in Rebel Without a Cause. Generally, you'll only be asked about one element of film form, so question A could be identify one example of sound in your chosen film for 1 mark. Question B would then be something along the lines of briefly explain what this example of sound typically suggests for 4 marks. Now, the phrase typically suggests refers to how this example of sound, or whichever element is mentioned in the question, is used generally across all films. So you might say that non-diegetic sound is used to create tension or an atmosphere in a film, that it works as a cue for how the audience should react, and provides an insight into the director's intention. The final segment of question 1 would explore how this and other examples of sound are used in at least one key sequence from your chosen film for 10 marks. I'm not going to go through what would be model or exemplar answers now, because that would be a whole other podcast, but I will go through what will become some reoccurring pointers for tackling the exam questions. First of all, the idea of these step questions are that they ease you into writing longer responses, but they also link in with each other. So your answer to question 1A, so identify an example of sound, links to question 1B. What does this example of sound typically suggest? You will lose marks and possibly even score 0 if you answer 1B about a completely different thing than what you'd written or given as an answer for 1A. So if you've written non-diegetic sound for 1A, you need to discuss the typical use of non-diegetic sound in 1B. Finally, this might seem obvious, but the term from your chosen film has been known to throw people off or confuse them in the past. There are a total of 5 films or 5 pairings of films that the exam board provide us teachers with. We then pick one of those films or pairings to teach you, for you then to answer the questions on the exam. Now, when it says your chosen film in this case is Rebel Without a Cause. So where can you find Rebel Without a Cause? The film is available to buy for $7.99 from iTunes, Sky Store, Google Play and Rakuten. You can also rent the film from these providers for about half the price of a purchase. If you would prefer the old school way of doing things, a new and sealed copy of the DVD is $4.99 on Amazon. There are a lot of clips scattered about on YouTube, on both the Movie Clips channel and the fantastic Film Studies Fundamentals channel. So to take you through some of the context then surrounding the film. This was the first major studio, so Warner Brothers, to make a teen film. It had high production values and hot young stars. Now, one of the big things surrounding the film is the crusade against communism, or the Red Scare. Now, the definition of communism is a system where all property is public and people work and are given things by the government according to their needs. A Red Scare is the promotion of a widespread fear of a potential rise of communism by a society or state. The name refers to the red flags that the communists used. The term is most often used to refer to 2 periods in the history of the United States, which are referred to by this name. A reoccurring mood in many of the films of the 1950s was that of paranoia. This was a reflection of the climate of fear created by the mass hysteria of the McCarthy witch hunts or McCarthyism. In Rebel Without a Cause, Jim does not know who to trust or who to listen to. Suburbs were growing in this era. This story focuses on the youths in a Los Angeles suburb where new family homes were desirable but cold and lifeless, and there is little affection in these homes. More people speaking out against inequality civil rights in this time. The film demonstrated the desire for young people to do the right thing. Jim wants to confess and desires justice, but it's the older generation that get in the way of this and do not listen to him. Taglines for the film showed a confusion about how the film should be marketed: teen drama or B-movie. So some of the taglines were teenage terror torn from today's headlines, or the bad boy from a good family. Rebel showed that films centered on teenagers could well be from the teenager's point of view and appeal to a teenage audience. The film is from the male point of view. Girls are quite passive figures. Female-led teen movies were more dominant in the 1990s. The 1950s are considered to be the birth of the teenager. This social group had a new identity. Young people had more money, so a disposable income. Products such as music, film and fashion were targeted at this group. They were powerful consumers and therefore a powerful voice in consumerist America. Teenagers of the time were also receiving a better education, which led them to question the world. It was a time of peace, so young men were not at war. A confusing era for young men who could not identify with their wartime fathers, or have a war to fight and prove themselves. This new social group was considered by some as threatening, unruly, and out of control. The film reflected and responded to this concern. This film was a sympathetic representation of teenagers blaming the parents for their delinquency. If we consider James Dean then and his star power, James Dean was a new kind of actor. He was a method actor, and he became an icon and the face of a generation. He appeared poetic, tormented, brooding, and not the usual type of hero. The Outsider is also a typical narrative convention of the teen genre. This trope allows the audience to explore the new school location and characters with the protagonist. So the film takes place over a 2-day period, and is most commonly seen from the point of view of a teenager. A mistrust of authority figures, parents overtly criticised for being too weak or too dominant, they can't win at all, but the message clearly appeals to the target audience. So the big link here for us is that we're looking at the development of American cinema. So let's think about Hollywood for a second. So technically, Hollywood is an ethnically diverse, densely populated, relatively low-income neighbourhood in the central region of Los Angeles, California. It refers to the home of the US film industry. In 1910, many film studios found their home in LA, and the world's most prominent film industry emerged. In 1913, the Hollywood name was formally adopted and became the centre of the film industry. Now for some further reading on Rebel Without a Cause, check out Lawrence Fiscala's book Live Fast, Die Young, The Wild Ride of Making Rebel Without a Cause, which is available to buy on Amazon. Thank you very much for listening to the required learning for Rebel Without a Cause. I'll be back soon with a full film commentary for Rebel to support this episode and your revision for Paper 1. You can help support Farrand on Film by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Farrand on Film, by following us on Twitter at Farrand on Film, by liking us on Facebook at facebook.com/Farrand on Film, and leaving a 5-star review at your favourite podcast provider. Stay safe, stay indoors, look after each other, and I will see you next time.